How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another Marvel Snap video. I have been in the desert for the last week off-roading with my family, but I am back, and today I am giving you 5 tips to attempt to help you get to infinite. The first few tips are to help you guys just become better Snap players overall, and the last tip is actually something that you can do immediately to increase your cubes gained per game. So if you're not already doing it, I suggest that you do. And as usual, if you love all things Marvel Snap and you love video games, make sure you like and subscribe, hit the bell. Let's talk about the first point. So my first tip is to take the time to understand snapping, retreating, and staying. I don't just mean from me. I mean, go watch other people's videos, other creators' videos, see what their takes on it. I think a lot of us have different philosophies when it comes to snapping, retreating, and staying. If you're curious about mine, I have a video that compares Marvel Snap to poker. So after this video, if you haven't seen that one, go check it out. It kind of gets very math based. So if you're not into that, maybe don't check it out. I don't know. It'll help a lot of you, so go check that out. In general, you want to snap before your advantage is made apparent. So if you're playing like a Silver Surfer deck, generally want to snap before turn 5, before you drop your Sarah. If you're playing a Thanos deck, you're going to want to snap, again, probably before turn 5, before you drop Leech and disable their entire hand. So any of those big swingy plays, you're going to want to snap beforehand, because if you snap after, it's a very easy retreat for your opponent. Now, this is kind of basic for a lot of you guys, but your snap strategy is going to change based on what deck that you're playing. And this kind of leads us into our next 2 points. So point number 2 is to learn the meta. Learning the meta is going to do 2 things for you. The first one is you're going to understand what your opponents are generally playing. A lot of people you're going to face on ladder, especially as you get up to higher ranks, are going to be playing these top meta decks. Very rarely do people experiment at those ranks. So understanding what cards your opponent has, what their deck is trying to do, is going to be really advantageous to you as you rank up. The second thing it's going to do is give you a better idea of how good decks work in Marvel Snap. It's going to show you different packages that come in most decks, like the early destroy package with Carnage, Hood, Nova, Deathlock, that kind of early destroy package. And then it'll show you different packages for specific cards like Darkhawk with Korg and Rockslide. You'll learn things like just the good cards package. If you kind of have a deck idea and you need to fill it with good cards, playing Lizard, Sunspot, and those kind of early game cards to fill in those slots. They're generally things that you're not going to learn very quickly on your own, but studying the meta and the meta decks are going to help you make the process of learning all of this a lot faster. All right, so as I was editing this, I realized that I didn't tell you guys where you could find the top metagame tier lists. So I have 2 sites. I'm going to show those to you now. So the first site is marvelsnapzone.com. They come out with a weekly tier list. This is their tier list for April 11th. If you haven't heard of this site, it's a really good resource along with the next site I'm going to talk about. But this is their weekly kind of breakdown of the meta. They have a list of what they think are tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and then kind of some budget decks for those of you who aren't pool 3 complete yet. So I'd recommend going through this list. It's generally pretty accurate on what decks are kind of dominating the meta. This kind of will give you good shells to work with, like the Shuri shell or this Sarah Miracle Control shell. When you click on them, it will give you a specific deck list, but it will also give you some related decks underneath that aren't the exact deck list. So this site is a really good starting point. They also have a lot of other articles and resources. If you're in a certain pool, you want to look up specific decks for that. They just have a lot of different stuff on this site. So if you haven't heard of them, go check them out. Go browse the site. Find what you find useful on there. The second site that I recommend using is snap.fan. They actually just started doing their tier list, I think this week. They actually did it live over at the Snap Judgments podcast. You've heard me talk about them a lot. Go check them out. But they just put out their own tier list, and it kind of agrees a lot with the Snap Zone tier list. If you listen to the podcast, they kind of go into more depth on what they think of the decks and why they place them where they place them. So this is also a good website. They have a deck builder on here that I use to showcase my decks to you guys. So you can save your decks on here, look at them again later. It's also just a really great resource. So that's it. Back to the video. Which brings us to point 3. When you're trying all these different meta decks, when you're trying your own decks, when you're trying other decks that you see on YouTube that look fun, give them time. You want to give yourself plenty of reps with a deck to 1, learn the deck, and 2, see if the deck is actually good. You're not going to find out in the first few games. If you win all the games, the deck could still suck. You just got lucky. And if you lose all the games, the deck could be a top tier deck, but you're not giving it the chance. And even then, it takes time to learn how a deck plays. As you play the game more, you get more experience. You start playing as much as some of us content creators. You'll kind of get a better feel of a deck when you see the list of kind of how it plays, and the learning curve will be a lot quicker, but it does take some time. It does take more than 5 games, 10 games. You want to play 20 or more games with each of these decks to kind of get a good solid feel of it. So overall, just give yourself time to learn the deck. Give it a chance before you write it off and say that it sucks. Tip number 4 is going to be different for everyone, but it's learning how to manage tilt. For those of you who don't know what tilt is, it's kind of the frustration that comes with either playing poorly or losing games, and it can be really detrimental to people climbing ranks when that frustration affects their gameplay. Tilt is a culprit of countless poker players' careers ending. You can be the best poker player in the world, but if you can't manage tilt and your bankroll, you're going to go broke and you're going to have nothing to play with. The same applies to Marvel Snap. If you start going on a losing streak and you get frustrated with the game, you start snapping incorrectly, start staying in games that you shouldn't stay in, you start hitting end turn and then realizing immediately you made an incorrect play, and it just gets you more frustrated and playing more poorly. Obviously, that's not good. And so you want to find the best way for you to manage tilt. For me, and I think just a good general advice for this is to step away from the game. Take 10 minutes, take half an hour, sometimes just take a full day off. After I step away for about 15 minutes, I can come back to the game with a fresh head and get back to playing properly. I hate when people say this. It just frustrates me more when I am on tilt. But unless you're playing in top tournaments and you're working to be the best at Marvel Snap, or you're a content creator and you're trying to be one of the top players, remember, it's still just a game. I'm the worst person at taking this advice, and I hate when people tell it to me, but overall, it's just a game. You play video games to have fun, you play it to compete, you play it to enjoy. So take a step back, take a break, and come back to it a little bit later. And my last tip that'll help you guys gain cubes immediately is stop hitting the retreat now button. For the love of God, please stop hitting retreat now. I watch streamers do it all the time. I've had people leave on turn 6 when I'm about to retreat, and they retreat before I can hit the button. Hit retreat later. Give your opponent a chance to also retreat. I have saved so many cubes just by doing this. For those of you who don't know, when you hit retreat later, it waits until the end of your turn until the opponent either stays in or also retreats before having you leave the game. Which means if at the beginning of your turn you hit retreat later and your opponent does some thinking and decides to retreat as well, you both lose nothing. Whereas at the beginning of the turn, if you hit retreat now, you will leave immediately, you will lose that cube, and your opponent, who may have retreated later, just gets a free cube. So stop hitting retreat now and hit retreat later. Also, on the same token, stop retreating in earlier turns. Wait until your opponent snaps on a turn and you don't want to stay in to retreat, or wait till turn 6 when you actually have to make a decision to put more cubes in. It doesn't make any sense to just retreat and not give yourself the chance to win the game in the next few turns. I know a lot of you are going to say, well, I like retreating because it saves time. I can get in this next game. I don't care. You're going to play multiple games throughout the month. Try to maximize your cubes gained per game and not your cubes gained per time. One of the things that newer chess players are taught very early on is to stop resigning games. You want to give your opponent a chance to make a mistake. You're not staying in for that much longer. It's a few turns. It's going to take a couple minutes. Give your opponent a chance to make a mistake. Let something cool happen in the game. Enjoy the game and try to maximize your cubes gained per game. And that's it for my tips. I hope you got something from this video. If you're not already, go check out my Twitter. Follow me on there. I post stuff daily. And if you haven't already, go check out my Patreon. And as usual, if you love all things Marvel Snap and you love video games, make sure you like and subscribe, hit the bell. See you in the next one.